Washington's army had survived the Battle of Brooklyn, but survival had only carried it into a tighter prison. The British controlled the approaches. Siege works moved closer. The East River blocked the rear. On August 29, Washington's
the American
generals
unanimously agreed to evacuate. Boats were secretly gathered. Most soldiers were not told the real plan. Campfires would remain burning while thousands of men disappeared from the lines. But the crossing was supposed to begin around 8 o'clock, and the wind refused to cooperate. 3 hours of darkness lost meant another regiment trapped at sunrise. The Americans had escaped the battlefield. Now they had to escape time.
We must move
quickly,
but quietly.
The Americans had escaped the battlefield.
The British mustn't know
now
we're retreating.
They had to escape time.
Load the men now, keep it
the
silent.
The evacuation required secrecy on a scale difficult to maintain inside a crowded military position. Washington could not announce that the army was retreating. If the British learned the plan, they could attack the rear guard, target the ferry, or move ships into the East River. If the soldiers learned
the operation
too early,
was disguised.
Fear might spread through the
Some
lines
men were
and
told
turn
they
an
were
organized
changing
withdrawal
positions.
into a rush toward
Others
the boats.
believed units were being relieved.
So the operation was disguised. Some men were told they were changing positions. Others believed units were being relieved. Orders passed quietly through commanders. Equipment moved toward the ferry without explanation. Campfires remained burning. Sentries stayed in place. The British had to believe the American army intended to remain in Brooklyn. Wagon wheels were muffled to reduce sound. Talking was restricted. Men moved through mud and darkness, often without understanding the full operation. What if one frightened soldier had shouted that the army was abandoning Brooklyn? What if a loyalist inside the lines had reached the British with the news? The retreat depended on thousands of people knowing enough to perform their role but not enough to expose the whole plan. At the river, Colonel John Glover's Marblehead Regiment prepared the boats.
Their skill
Many
mattered
of these men came from
because
a
the
maritime
East
community
River
and
is
had
not
worked
a
as sailors
quiet
or
river
fishermen.
in the ordinary sense.
Other experienced Massachusetts mariners also helped. Their skill mattered because the East River is not a quiet river in the ordinary sense. It is a tidal strait. Currents can pull boats away from a direct course. Wind can make a short crossing dangerous. A
Ammunition,
heavily loaded
horses,
craft could
cannon,
become
and
unstable
supplies.
in darkness.
They would cross to Manhattan,
The boats had to carry
unload,
infantry,
return to
ammunition,
Brooklyn, and load
horses,
again.
Cannon, and supplies. They would cross to Manhattan, unload, return to Brooklyn, load again, and repeat the movement until the final rear guard
and the
was
movement
safe.
repeated until the final
No
rear guard
navigation
was
lights
safe.
could reveal the route.
No navigation
loud
lights
commands
could reveal
could
the
organize
route,
the landings.
and now the revolution depended on their
The
ability
crews
to
had
pull
already
oars
endured
through the
days
night.
of rain,
The
uncertainty,
evacuation
and
was
military
intended to
strain.
begin around 8 in the
Now
evening.
the revolution depended on their ability to pull oars through the night. Every hour mattered. 9 o'clock passed. 10
Faster,
o'clock.
men! We must get across
The British
before the storm
engineers
hits.
continued working
Pull,
beyond
lads.
the American
Put
lines.
your backs into it!
The darkness became shorter. Around 11 o'clock, according to later reconstructions, the wind weakened or shifted enough for the small boats to operate more effectively.
The darkness became
The
shorter.
crossing began
Around
to
11
develop a
o'clock,
rhythm.
according to later
regiment
reconstructions, the
received
wind weakened
quiet
or
orders.
shifted enough for the small boats
Its
to operate
soldiers
more
left the
effectively.
fortifications. Another unit expanded its position to hide the gap. The departing men moved toward the ferry. Boats loaded. Oars entered the river. The craft disappeared toward Manhattan. Then the empty boats returned. The operation looked simple only from a distance. At the landings, men, animals, equipment, and
Bring her
artillery
about, steady
crowded
now!
narrow spaces.
We need the next load!
The boat crews had to judge current and
75 men and
balance.
the brass cannon secure,
Officers
sir!
counted units in darkness. Soldiers waited without knowing when their turn would come. Washington remained near the Brooklyn ferry, supervising the movement. He had already been under extraordinary strain. He later wrote that for approximately 48 hours
He had
before
scarcely
the
been off
retreat
his
was
horse and
completed,
had not
he
closed
had
his
scarcely
eyes.
been off his horse
He did not
and had
personally
not
control
closed his
every
eyes.
boat. The Marblehead boat commander,
did not
McDougal,
personally
Mifflin,
control every
Putnam,
boat.
and numerous
Glover,
unnamed
McDougal,
officers and
Mifflin,
sailors performed
Putnam,
essential
and
tasks.
numerous unnamed
But the
officers and
American
sailors
commander
performed
carried the
essential
final
tasks.
responsibility. He had chosen to
Washington
defend
carried the
Brooklyn.
final
He had
responsibility.
divided the army.
If the retreat
The defensive
failed,
system
the
had
disaster would
failed to
belong
secure
him.
Jamaica Pass.
He had chosen to defend Brooklyn. He had divided the army. The defensive system had failed to secure Jamaica Pass.
The American commander did not
rescue the
escape
force from the
because he had made no mistakes.
This is where the story becomes more complicated than the legend of a
He
flawless
escaped
commander.
because he recognized that the objective
Washington
had
did
changed.
not escape because
Holding
he had made
Brooklyn
no
was
mistakes.
no longer victory.
He
Saving the
escaped
army
because he
was
recognized
victory.
that the objective had changed. Holding Brooklyn was no longer victory. Saving the army was victory. Brigadier General Thomas Mifflin commanded important rearguard troops. Their duty was the most dangerous. They had to remain close to the British while the rest of the army disappeared. They maintained the fires. They occupied the works. They made the defensive line appear stronger than it was. As neighboring units withdrew, the rear guard stretched thinner. A position that had held many men might now be occupied by only a few.
Smaller noises
The
inside
Americans
the
had to
American
become
lines.
weaker without appearing weaker. British troops were close. Their engineers were digging approaches through wet ground. The sound of British tools may have helped conceal smaller noises inside the American lines. Yet the same closeness meant one patrol could expose the operation.
Belay that movement, Captain.
At some point
Return
before
your men
dawn,
to the lines.
a confusion
we
in
are not
orders nearly
retreating
caused
across
disaster.
the ferry.
Later accounts describe Mifflin's
Tidbits
troops
under
beginning
the
to
duck your
withdraw
size
earlier than
dayton.
Washington intended. Washington encountered them moving toward the ferry and ordered them back to the lines. The famous dialogue attached to the incident comes from later retellings and should not be treated as a perfectly recorded conversation.
Mifflin's men returned.
The
The British
famous
did not
dialogue
attack.
attached
The
to the
evacuation
incident comes from
continued.
later
By around
retellings
1
and
o'clock
should
in the
not be
morning,
treated
some
as a
American units had
perfectly
already
recorded
reached
conversation.
Manhattan.
The danger itself was
But a
real.
large part of the army
If the rear
remained
guard
in
abandoned the defenses too soon, the British might advance into empty positions and discover the retreat while thousands of Americans still waited for boats. Mifflin's men returned. The British did not attack.
2 o'clock passed, 3
The
o'clock, 4
evacuation
o'clock.
continued.
The boat crews
By
continued
around
crossing.
1 o'clock in the
The
morning,
soldiers at the
some
ferry
American
waited in
units had
silence.
already reached Manhattan. But a large part of the army remained in Brooklyn. 2 o'clock passed. 3 o'clock.
It was the illusion
4
maintained
o'clock.
on land.
The
The
boat
British could
crews
hear
continued
activity,
crossing.
but armies often
The
moved
soldiers
supplies
at the
or
ferry
changed
waited in
units at
silence.
night.
There was no
Equipment
obvious
crowded
reason
the
to
landing.
believe the American commander
Horses
would attempt to
shifted in the
remove
darkness.
thousands of men across a tidal
Mud slowed
channel
every
in one
movement.
operation.
The most remarkable part of the operation may not have been the number of boats. It was the illusion maintained on land.
The British
could hear
believed the
activity,
Americans were
but armies
contained.
often moved
That belief
supplies or
became
changed
another form
units
of
at night.
concealment. They did
There was
not
no
merely
obvious
fail to see
reason
the
to
retreat.
believe Washington would attempt to remove thousands of men across a tidal channel in one operation. The British believed the Americans were contained.
The American
belief
commander
became
faced the
another
one
form of
problem no
concealment.
order could solve.
They did not merely
Night was
fail
ending.
to see the retreat.
The rear guard had not all crossed.
They failed to imagine it soon enough. As the eastern sky began to brighten, Washington faced the one problem no order could solve.
Large
Night was
quantities
ending.
of equipment still
The
had to
rear
be
guard
moved.
had not all crossed.
What if the sun
Washington
rose into a
remained on the
clear
Long
sky?
Island side. Boat crews were exhausted. Large quantities of equipment still had to be moved. What if the sun rose into a clear sky? British observers could see empty sections of the defenses. Patrols could advance. Artillery could
It might
threaten
not
the ferry.
survive morning. Then the
Warships
air
might
over
enter
Brooklyn
the channel if
changed.
conditions
A
allowed.
dense fog formed
The
over
retreat
the
had
American
survived
side
the
of
British
river.
Army.
Accounts describe the roads
might
and
not survive
fortifications
morning.
becoming heavily obscured,
Then the
while
air
visibility
over
across the
Brooklyn
water
changed.
remained sufficient for the
A
boat crews
dense
to
fog
continue
formed
navigating.
over the American side
Fog
of the
is a
river.
natural weather event.
Accounts describe
It
the
forms
roads and
when moisture,
fortifications becoming
temperature,
heavily obscured
wind,
while
and
visibility
terrain
across
align.
the water remains sufficient for the boat crews
But
to
ordinary
continue
weather
navigating.
can become historically extraordinary
is a
when it
natural
arrives
weather
during
event.
a narrow interval.
It forms when
The fog
moisture,
came after the
temperature,
It
wind,
came after
and terrain
conditions
align.
improved enough for the small boats to
But
cross.
ordinary weather can
It
become
came when
historically
darkness ended
extraordinary
before
when
the
it arrives
evacuation
during a
did.
narrow interval.
The fog did
The
not
fog came
collect
after
boats.
the northeast wind had
It did not
complicated British
organize
naval
the
movement.
regiments.
It came after conditions improved enough for the
More
small
concealment,
boats to
more
cross.
time. Under the fog, the final
It came
units
when
moved toward the
darkness ended
ferry,
before the
and the Marblehead
evacuation
boat
did.
commander's sailors and the
The
other boat
fog did
crews
not
continued
collect
rowing.
boats. It did not organize the regiments. It did not maintain the rear guard. It gave Washington something his army could
Men
not
crossed
create.
to Manhattan, unloaded,
concealment.
and sent the craft back
More
for
time.
those still waiting.
Under the fog, the final units moved toward the
The
ferry.
American commander later reported
Glover's
that the
sailors
retreat
and the
removed
other
the
boat
Army's
crews
men and
continued rowing.
ammunition without losing
Men
anyone
crossed to
during the
Manhattan,
evacuation
unloaded,
itself.
and sent the craft back for those still waiting. Washington later reported that the retreat removed the Army's men and ammunition without losing anyone during the evacuation itself. Most cannon and stores were carried away. A few heavy guns could not be moved because rain had softened the ground.
It was successful because the American commander understood what mattered most. Not every gun,
cattle and provisions
not every
also
wagon,
remained behind.
the Army.
The operation was not perfect. It was successful because Washington understood what mattered most. Not every gun. Not every wagon. The Army. Later tradition identifies Washington as the last man to leave Brooklyn. The most careful wording is that he remained through the final stage and was among the last to cross. By around 7 o'clock on the morning of August 30th, roughly 9,000 American troops had reached Manhattan. The fog began to thin. British patrols moved toward the American works. They found fires still burning. They found abandoned positions and some equipment that could not be removed. What they did not find was Washington's army. The British had won the battle. They had captured the ground. They had driven the Americans against a river. Yet the central prize had escaped.
They had driven the Americans against a river.
Of people whose names
Yet
rarely
the
appear
central
in the famous
prize
version
had
of the story.
escaped.
Boat crews judged current without visible markers. Artillery teams dragged wheels through mud. Soldiers steadied frightened horses in unstable
Boat
craft.
crews judged current without
Officers
visible
counted
markers.
men at crowded
Artillery
landings.
teams dragged wheels
Messengers
through mud.
carried whispered
Soldiers
orders through a
steadied frightened
defensive
horses.
line
Pass
where
the
one
word quietly.
misunderstood
We
instruction
move at
could
high
reveal
tide.
everything.
One mistake and we're done
Some
for.
men reached
Heave.
Manhattan and immediately
Watch
helped
the
unload
tide
the
there,
next
lads.
boat.
Others remained in Brooklyn
Brooklyn
without knowing whether enough space would exist for them. They could not
They
see
could
the
not
full
see the full
operation.
operation.
The Americans
They
were
saw
not merely
only the
moving an
regiment
army.
ahead moving
They were
slowly
hiding the
toward
army
the
of
water
absence.
and the dark
As
river
units
beyond
left,
it.
the remaining defenders
The
occupied
Americans
wider
were not
sections of
merely
the works.
moving an army. They were hiding the army's absence. As units left, the remaining defenders occupied wider sections of the works. A position once held by many soldiers might be represented by a few sentries and a fire. The illusion had to survive
The illusion
at close
had
range.
to survive at close range.
Withdraw too
Withdraw
slowly,
too slowly,
and sunrise would reveal the movement.
Withdraw too quickly, and an empty section of earthworks would reveal it before dawn. The British belief that the American commander was contained helped the deception.
Their siege plan appeared logical. Their engineers were approaching methodically. The Americans had water behind them.
There was no obvious reason to expect a mass evacuation under poor weather conditions. That assumption became part of Washington's concealment. What if one British officer had decided to test the lines during the night? A patrol entering an underdefended position could have discovered the truth. One messenger reaching Howe might have transformed a quiet siege into an immediate assault.
But no such alarm came in time.
The fog did not hide an improvised
panic.
It hid an operation that had already endured hours
matters.
of disciplined movement.
Weather can conceal confusion.
That distinction matters.
But confusion would not
Weather
have
can
carried
conceal
horses,
confusion,
ammunition.
but confusion
In the final
would not have
part,
carried
the
cannon,
question becomes
horses,
larger than
ammunition,
how the retreat
and thousands of
happened.
men across a tidal strait. The final crossing succeeded because the army remained organized long enough for the weather to matter. In the final part, the question becomes larger than how the retreat happened. Did the fog truly save the American Revolution, or did later memory transform disciplined planning into a miracle?
And the terrifying
We will examine
possibility
Washington's
that
failures,
1 hour
Howe's
of
hesitation,
clear weather
and the
could
terrifying
have changed the
possibility that 1
future
hour of
the
clear
United
weather could have
States.
changed the future of the United States. Because the fog did not win independence. It preserved the army that still had to survive the war.